Poor guy. That was the only thought I had after finishing the chapter. At the time, I was still Daniel Mercer, an ordinary reader living in my original world. How could I feel anything else? It was the story of a genius who should have made his name known throughout the world, only to have his life destroyed by his older brother's jealousy. Reduced to a complete wreck, he eventually died by that same brother's hand. Until then, the dead man had carried every disgrace imaginable. The entire nation had cursed his name, and not even his own family had shed a tear when he died. That alone said everything. The villainous brother eventually lost his reputation, his fortune, and his life at Arthur Sterling's hands, so the ending was satisfying enough. I tried to stop thinking about it, but another disapproving click escaped my tongue. Perhaps I had spent too much emotion on the chapter because exhaustion suddenly washed over me. The revenge had felt all the more gratifying after so much suffering, but that did nothing to lessen my fatigue. Once I woke up, the anger would have faded, and I could read the next chapter with a clearer head. With that thought, I collapsed face first onto my bed. When I opened my eyes again, the world was already swallowed in darkness. I opened my mouth to shout, but no real volume came out. The sound was little more than air leaking through my throat. I forced myself to try again. Metal clanged against metal. I ran my hands along my leg and found a metal shackle. Fortunately, whoever had put it on had not forced it tightly enough to injure me. There was a little space between the iron and my skin, so my circulation was not cut off. My heart began to pound. Before I could prepare myself, a thin line of light appeared in the blackness. It widened in an instant as a door opened. After so long in complete darkness, even that light made my eyes ache. Cedric Valecourt greeted me as though this were an ordinary visit. The instant I saw him, a word escaped my mouth without permission. Brother. Then Elliot's terror surged through me, forcing out an apology before I could ask where I was. The man sounded bewildered. What? No. What are you talking about? Eli, I won't do it again, brother. I was wrong. I'll take the medicine properly from now on. I mean it. Please don't kill me. Eli. He had called me Eli. Still wearing a gentle expression, the man said that he had been checking on my condition and asked whether I had waited long. My condition? I repeated. He assured me that I had been right about taking my medicine. According to him, the real problem was that my illness had worsened and the old dose no longer worked. Then, with perfectly rehearsed regret, he apologized for misunderstanding me. Illness? I echoed, although the word only deepened my suspicion. He reacted with exaggerated alarm. What? Oh dear. You must have been suffering terribly. How did everyone allow you to reach this state? Illness, medicine, brother, Eli, the scattered pieces were beginning to fit together. My brother claimed that the dose had been increased and that everything would soon be fine. He even said that imprisoning me underground for a week had been necessary to prevent another supposed accident. When I asked about the black liquid, he described it as the same familiar medicine, only stronger and more concentrated. At least you'll still be able to leave for school on time, he added warmly. Isn't that fortunate? Once someone stronger had been born, the elder brother's chance of becoming family head disappeared. He therefore decided to seal Elliot's power before it could mature. The medicine he praised was not a cure, but a poison designed to suppress magical power. After drinking it for half his life, Elliot had lost the ability to cast, his body had withered, and death had crept closer year by year. My brother had locked him in a lightless cellar for supposedly missing a dose, then claimed that the abuse was for Elliot's own good. Worse, after graduation, he was destined to murder Elliot personally. Now that light had entered the room, I could see what the darkness had hidden. The clothes belonged to an unfamiliar place and era. Long, neglected hair hung into my vision. My body was little more than bone beneath sickly blue skin. This was not my body. No matter how. Many times I looked. It could never be mine. It was easier to believe that I had entered the body of a minor character who had lived under a fabricated diagnosis, swallowed his brother's poison, and was doomed to die at 20. I've talked for too long, he said. The black poison, faintly tinted blue, shifted before my eyes. With a soft smile and a gentle voice, He gave his command. "Drink it now, Eli." One of the servants seemed to realize the same thing and spoke in alarm. "Young master, perhaps, do you have something to say? You won't die. Trust me, you know this. Is all for your own good." A translucent system message appeared before me. It offered only two outcomes: make the optimal choice and move forward, or die. I took the medicine yesterday. My brother's smile did not change. "Of course, I believe you always tell the truth, but mistakes happen whenever information passes through too many hands. For example, perhaps the person who served your tea forgot to mix the medicine into it," he continued in that same compassionate tone. "Even if everything you were told is true, it changes nothing. I only want to make certain your symptoms are properly controlled. If you made a mistake in front of your friends, you would be very upset, wouldn't you, Eli?" A demon could not have performed the role more perfectly. He had always been like this. In the novel and in Elliot's memories, he never stopped pretending to be a loving older brother. No one looking at that warm smile and hearing those gentle words would have guessed how much inferiority and superiority were twisted together behind them. Every place the liquid touched, from my tongue to my stomach, burned as though it had been set on fire. A heartbeat later, the cold stone floor pressed against the left side of my face. The poison I had just swallowed surged back out of my mouth. The noises around me, including what must have been my own choking, blurred into one distant mass. Somewhere at the edge of my awareness, my brother spoke with laughter in his voice. "So, you really did take it yesterday." A chime confirmed that I had made the optimal choice. The death route disappeared, and the system advanced me into its first true stage. I had survived the poison. From that moment on, I intended to keep surviving until I could turn my brother's scheme against him. I had no idea how much time passed before pale sunlight slipped through the gap between the curtains. The burning pain in my stomach and throat was gone. My body felt strangely light, as though healing magic had repaired the damage. When I woke again, the system presented its first real assignment. I had a little under 3 days to identify 3 things I needed to do in order to reclaim my life. Success would open the stronger route. Failure would leave me advancing almost by accident. This was not a game, so the idea should have been absurd. Then again, a non-game world was already presenting me with something called a suggestion. My status identified me as Elliot Valecourt, titled Asteria's Greatest Fool. Health stood at -5, mental strength at -10, skill at 0, impression and luck at -10, while magic remained unknown. My only trait was Dawn 777. I read the name again, Elliot Valecourt. That was right. His actual name was Elliot. Eli was only the affectionate name his brother used. In the novel, everyone except Arthur Sterling and the older brother had called him Elliot. The trait revealed the truth plainly. Only 777 days remained until the final death ending, and the probability of changing it was just 0.2%. The number was dreadful, but it was not 0. If completing suggestions could raise it, then every correct choice might buy me another chance to live. A knock interrupted my thoughts. The servant who entered reported that I had been unconscious for almost a day, and that the Lord Cedric had healed my injuries with magic. Because the sudden light had damaged my eyes and my stomach had not fully recovered, I was to avoid bright light, eat carefully, and remain in the room until the following morning. My luggage, he added, had already been sent to the school dormitory. He was preparing to leave and bring food when I stopped him. Wait. The single word startled him so badly that he looked around before, asking whether I had truly spoken to him. "Who else is here?" I replied. If I intended to drag my brother down and rise above him, Elliot's old, timid manner would never be enough. Still, I softened my voice before asking where my brother had gone. The servant explained that the Lord Cedric had left for the Crownspire Palace the day after visiting me. Since Elliot was due to die little over 2 years later, and the brothers were 7 years apart, the elder should now be in his mid-20s, around the time his long foreign assignments began. The servant shifted uneasily. "Do you have any other instructions, young master?" Keeping my eyes on him, I summoned the status window. Marcus Hale's status showed favorability at -5, with modestly positive health, mental strength, magic, and luck. Even my personal servant disliked me, but the more important discovery was that I could inspect other people. Young master? Favorability almost certainly. Reflected how that person felt about me. Did I truly need my terrible reputation displayed in such brutally clear numbers? When I continued staring silently at the window, Marcus studied my face with concern. Young master? The suggestion required me to identify 3 actions necessary to reclaim my life within roughly 3 days. Success led to the stronger route. Failure led to a future that sounded far less promising. During his rise to the throne, Arthur Sterling eliminated Elliot's older brother, who had become little less than Emperor Roland IV's right hand. In the process, Elliot's death was investigated, and the elder brother's true nature was exposed to the world. I needed to increase my strength and gather allies beneath the surface. Until I had enough power and support, I could not openly use magic or do anything else that might convince my brother to return and kill me early. The system accepted my decision to recruit Nathaniel as the first of the 3 required objectives. Nathaniel Westbrook. Born into a family renowned for generations of magical medicine, Nathaniel would one day succeed in transforming my brother's poison into a core-enhancing drug. Nathaniel was the same age as both Arthur Sterling and Elliot. Merely choosing the right target had completed one of the 3 required tasks. So the system seemed willing to accept anything that would genuinely help me. I wanted to raise one of my miserable numbers, but improving my health or public impression immediately was unrealistic. The moment I stepped into the corridor, the whispered conversation and quiet laughter nearby stopped. Servants carrying their work froze and pressed themselves against the walls. The rejection Elliot had endured in the novel was now directed at me. Elliot had become an object of terror because of rumors his brother had spent years creating. According to those rumors, Elliot was connected to Bloodvale Covenant. Bloodvale Covenant was a religious organization whose followers believed they could maintain eternal life by absorbing other people's magic through blood. Most of its members claimed to be individuals who had died long ago and reincarnated roughly 10 years earlier. They insisted that resurrection proved they had been chosen by a god. But Bloodvale Covenant expanded by killing living people and attempting to revive them. Most of the bodies never returned. On rare occasions, however, a corpse rose again without its former consciousness. Both those empty bodies and the reincarnated members of Bloodvale Covenant consumed other people's magical power to preserve their flesh. Direct absorption caused severe damage, so they drank blood infused with magic to reduce the strain. My brother had carefully manufactured incidents ranging from minor scandals to murder, encouraging the public to imagine the worst about Elliot's sanity. Eventually, he succeeded in spreading the disgrace without ever dirtying his own mouth. Once created, the lie spread throughout Asteria at astonishing speed. When Asterian investigators and the press descended on Valecourt territory, my brother gave the performance of his life, acting as though he were shielding Elliot from the world. The result was extraordinary. He deceived my father, Duke Alistair Valecourt, the entire population, and even Elliot himself. The servants were no different. Unlike Elliot, however, I felt no desperation. After wandering through Valecourt Estate long enough for my strength to begin failing, I finally entered the first-floor library. I selected books on history and magic and placed them on a desk. The system offered a one-time reward. Whatever field I chose to study would be transformed from memorized knowledge into usable skill. An introduction to basic magic was obviously useless. I could learn the fundamentals on my own. One title promised that easy household magical pharmacology would change my life. I doubted it. Then I found a more valuable title, A Study of Divine Power as Authority. It described specialized magic performed through power, refined from ordinary mana. Divine power was refined from magical power, so the two were not fundamentally different. However, because divine power was processed magic, those trained to use it could generally handle both forms with ease, while ordinary mages struggled tremendously to manipulate divine power. I needed a way to alter memories or compel silence if the situation demanded it. Such magic placed a heavy burden on the caster's health and mind, and it carried many restrictions. Even if I mastered it, I would not be able to use it on my brother. I opened the book and forced every piece of information about divine power into my memory. Understanding was not required. For the reward, so I began by memorizing blindly. When I finished memorizing the book, the promised reward activated. The knowledge settled into my body as practical understanding, and I acquired the trait Divine Power. Young Master, Marcus, the servant from the previous day, arrived to find me. I followed him through the halls, while thinking about the journey. I was unlikely to use a teleportation device. Such tools worked by interacting with a mage's core. Elliot had been born a mage, but his thoughtful brother destroyed his core with poison every week. In practical terms, anything only a mage could use was unavailable to me. Marcus admitted that his own journey had taken a little under 3 days. He had only recently arrived at Valecourt estate and had not heard how long it took in my particular case. Marcus bowed. I will see you during the next holiday, young master. Please travel safely. Remembering Elliot's shy nature, I answered with only a slight nod. The following day, I discovered why Marcus had spoken of my particular case. The carriage bore the Valecourt family crest. Without being stopped for a single inspection, it passed through neighboring territories and reached the outskirts of Alderhaven in only 1 day. A sharp cry came from a carriage passing nearby. Only then did the suddenly empty road make sense. A magical family like Valecourt had no reason to use a carriage. Most of its members would simply teleport. So, who would be inside a family carriage? I erased the thought and forced myself back to calm. The system marked the second task complete. Mastering the divine power text had slightly improved both skill and luck. I summoned my status. After mastering divine power, my status still showed health -5 and mental strength -10, but skill had risen slightly to 0.002 and luck to -9.998. I now possessed both Dawn 777 and divine power. Walter Briggs, the coachman, eventually opened the door and announced that we had arrived. There was one more thing I needed to do. It might seem unrelated, but I suspected it would complete the final part of the suggestion. The servants assigned to Elliot avoided touching him unless his father demanded his presence. The last haircut had probably been before enrollment, when he had been required to meet his father. Besides, I had spent the night in the library and left as soon as the time came. So I had not said anything either. The plaza had been crowded when the family carriage first appeared. People had gradually noticed it and slipped away. Now only 3 or 4 remained. Until that moment, I had told myself I did not resent anyone. They were avoiding Elliot, not me. I lengthened my stride, entered the alley, and caught the fleeing student by the shoulder. "Excuse me." I relaxed my expression and offered the gentlest smile I could manage. He stared at me with his mouth open, unable to believe what was happening, before finally whispering, "Why?" "I need to ask you something." The system confirmed that I had completed all 3 parts of the first suggestion. By identifying my objective, learning divine power, and taking the first step toward changing my outward life, I had secured the better route into the next stage. That feels much better. I studied myself in the mirror, while deliberately replacing the defeated expression that appeared whenever I stopped paying attention with something more neutral. When I left the shop, the student I had stopped earlier followed 1 step behind. I thanked him for bringing me there. "You said we're in the same class?" He swallowed before answering. "Yes. Once students are assigned a class at our school, they stay together until graduation." Elliot. "You didn't know?" I knew that. Because Arthur Sterling attended this school, I remembered basic facts like that from the novel. The student gave an awkward laugh. "Oh, right. Of course." I must have misunderstood. His eyes widened as though I had demanded his wallet. Me? I'm Miles Carter. Why do you ask?" When we reached a large building, relief brightened Miles's face. "This is the dormitory. You should go in. I'll see you in class tomorrow." I stopped him before he could escape. His expression withered. Yes, my guilt had not lasted long. By then, I was already growing accustomed to the fear. Out of curiosity, I checked only his favorability and saw a perfect -10. After receiving my room assignment, I found that Valecourt Estate had sent only clothing, school books, writing materials, medicine, and a family wand Elliot had never been able to use. A letter lay inside the medicine case. It began, "To my beloved younger brother," and continued with my brother's usual performance. Concern for my health, comments about our father, and a suggestion that I should raise my grades to at least the class average. He ended by praying for divine protection and signing himself with heartfelt sincerity. I locked the poison in a drawer rather than destroying it. The vials could become evidence against him, and Nathaniel might eventually transform their contents into something useful. 4 days had passed since Elliot had swallowed 2 ordinary doses. The poison should have weakened enough for a test, so I raised the wand and released a thread of red magic. Agony stabbed through my chest and drove me to my knees. Even as the drug faded, using magic still punished the core my brother had damaged for years. I could not understand how he had slept peacefully after feeding such poison to his own brother. By the following morning, I could walk to class. A student passed without recognizing me, glanced back, and fled. The same delayed reaction spread through the dormitory lobby. The haircut had changed my appearance, but not the fear surrounding Elliot. 3 things kept that fear alive. The rumors connecting Elliot to Bloodvale Covenant, his admission to the magic department through an enormous family donation despite his apparent inability to cast, and the hostility of the Academy's most influential student, Nathaniel Westbrook. Even so, I had selected Nathaniel specifically because of his influence. He excelled in friendships, grades, conduct, and magic. His standing among the students was exceptionally strong. Elliot himself believed Nathaniel despised him. Near the end of the novel, while investigating Elliot's death, Nathaniel confessed a story from the past to Arthur Sterling. Elliot never knew it, but Nathaniel had seen him as a child, before his brother's abuse began in earnest. Nathaniel had been raised in a family devoted to medicine and possessed only weak talent for ordinary magic. He had lived at a distance from the magical world until the day he witnessed Elliot cast a spell. That moment drove him to dedicate his life to magic. Indifference would have been more difficult to reverse. Nathaniel already felt something powerful toward Elliot. If I preserved the intensity and dramatically changed its direction, I could turn it into an advantage. As I entered the classroom, one student stared at my cleaned-up appearance and sneered, "You really do live long enough to see everything." Just how dreadful had Elliot looked for the past year? The system opened the next stage with a single urgent objective: make Nathaniel Westbrook my companion within 1 week. Failure led directly to death. Professor Edmund Clark opened the new term with a cheerful greeting and reminded us that we had already taken his course the previous year. The subject, he announced, would once again be the history of magic. When Nathaniel and I had made eye contact earlier, I had checked his favorability. It stood at -8. Everyone, focus. I will ask one final question. There was a council that decided all people whose magic had awakened must participate in the Sacred Concord once each year. Which council was it? Anyone who answers correctly will receive full marks for classroom attitude this term. It reminded me of high school in my former life. Once students stopped taking a teacher seriously, authority disappeared almost completely. The professor insisted that the question would not appear on the exam, but students of the Kingswell Arcane Academy should still know the answer. Although the textbook treated it only briefly, the event was essential to understanding the origin of modern divine power. This was the first class of the first day of our second year. It was a reasonable moment to begin acting on the suggestion and to decide what sort of behavior I would show at school from now on. Should I continue pretending to be the old Elliot here, just as I intended to do at home? I summoned the quest window, hoping the system might offer guidance. Nothing appeared except the existing suggestion to recruit Nathaniel. In the novel, my brother had never assigned a dedicated spy to Elliot. After seeing the physical and mental ruin I had awakened in, I understood why. What independent action could anyone expect from a person so completely broken? The 7th Luminara Council, I answered. The room went silent. When the professor continued staring, I asked with a mild smile whether I was wrong. He blinked, confirmed that the answer had come from me, and finally admitted that it was correct. Despite my frequent absences the previous year, I had remembered a detail that no one else in the room could recall. A new system hint appeared and directed me to check my survival probability. It had risen from 0.2 to 0.3%. The increase was small, but it confirmed that breaking away from Elliot's old behavior was the correct path. For the moment, I would not go out of my way to answer every question in class, but I had learned that I did not need to imitate Elliot's broken social behavior at school as thoroughly as I did at home. Fortunately, even the practical course was limited to orientation, so I did not need to use magic. I decided to postpone training until the poison had completely worn off. The first true practical magic lesson began on Monday. By then, my changed appearance and unexpected answer in history class had already become a favorite subject of gossip. Some students joked that it was the first time Elliot had looked like a real person. Others insisted that a haircut changed nothing, reviving the old story that I had eaten a rat and warning that I might finally begin behaving openly like a member of Bloodvale Covenant. Nathaniel ended the argument with a cold conclusion. Appearance did not matter, because Elliot still could not use magic. His words hid a far more complicated frustration. 10 years earlier, Nathaniel had seen Elliot cast a spell so brilliant that it inspired his entire life. He could not understand why someone born with such power had allowed rumors and humiliation to crush him. Professor Eleanor Hartwell began calling students forward to demonstrate a simple, offensive spell. The class was talented, but Nathaniel stood on another level entirely. After praising his performance, she called my name. I walked forward, raised the wand, and allowed a thin thread of red light to crackle at its tip. The weak flash was enough to throw the class into confusion because most students had believed I could not activate magic at all. Professor, I haven't used magic in so long that my condition is poor. May I stop here? After a brief hesitation, she allowed me to return to my place. The other students saw only a pathetic beginner's spark. Nathaniel saw the truth. Natural power like mine could be restrained, but not hidden from someone with his level of control. He understood that I had stopped the spell deliberately, and his favorability fell from -8 to -9. That was exactly what I wanted. Revealing my full strength would draw my brother's attention, while giving Nathaniel one private glimpse would provoke him into acting. The rest of the class soon lost interest, but Nathaniel continued watching me with growing anger. My status showed another small improvement. Skill rose to 0.015, and luck to -9.985. I could have raised my public impression much faster by displaying everything, but until Nathaniel stood beside me and my core was stable, secrecy mattered more than reputation. During the next several practical lessons, I repeated variations of the same excuse and revealed no more than a trace of power. After the fourth class, Nathaniel finally blocked my path with a cold expression. "You, come with me." He ordered me to meet him in the training hall at midnight. When I demanded an explanation, he refused. "If you don't come willingly, I'll drag you there," he warned. The suggestion window showed a little over 20 hours remaining. Nathaniel had always been unable to ignore anyone who treated magic like a joke, and I had deliberately pushed that obsession until he could no longer stay silent. At midnight, I left the dormitory. I had reached the general training complex, used by the magic department. Nathaniel owned a private training room, so I was supposed to find that one. Before I could find the private room, Nathaniel caught me outside and dragged me into the building. After sealing the entrance with several locking spells, he turned on me. "Do you think we're all idiots?" When I asked what he meant, he accused me of deliberately stopping my spells before they could form. "The professor seemed to notice," I replied. "The other students didn't." Nathaniel laughed without humor and told me to leave the academy if I intended to treat magic like a game. He blamed my admission through a donation and said that someone who refused to participate seriously had no place there. "So I'm ruining the academic atmosphere?" I asked. He said I understood perfectly. When I challenged him to explain why my behavior concerned him, He insisted that a school belonged to its students as much as its professors. A professor waiting for retirement might ignore a student who refused to learn, but that did not make the neglect acceptable. Nathaniel truly sounded like a future companion of Arthur Sterling. His argument was more principled than I had expected, but I still pointed out that his first responsibility should have been confronting the negligent professor, not summoning me in the middle of the night. When I turned as though to leave, Nathaniel's voice hardened. "Raise your wand." He proposed a duel. If I won, he would remain silent, no matter how I behaved in class. If he won, I would leave the academy. He smiled coldly. "What's wrong? You talked well a moment ago. Have you lost your confidence?" "Not at all." Instead of using the Valecourt family's formal salute preserved in Elliot's memories, I gave Nathaniel only a casual nod and adjusted my grip on the wand. By the time I looked up, Nathaniel's spell was already in front of me. The attack struck the wall with a thunderous crash. Part of the structure broke away and scattered across the floor. Elliot had not used proper magic for nearly 10 years. Talent meant little if it was never trained. He could not reasonably compare with someone who, despite weaker natural gifts, had spent a decade pursuing magic with obsessive determination. I had come to make Nathaniel my ally. "You're dodging?" I threw up the minimum possible defense. Most of the attack was blocked, but several fragments pierced the barrier and stung my skin. What Nathaniel wanted was to see me use real magic. When I continued defending without launching a meaningful attack, Nathaniel spoke with open contempt. "Are you going to do anything at all? Did you come here only to waste time?" Nathaniel rolled his wand between his fingers, extended it, and struck the floor. I drew the greatest output I could from my heart. The thorns cut through my sleeve and bit into my skin, interfering with the magic flowing through my veins. But the spell had already been released. I had expected him to care more about seeing the spell than about winning the bet, but allowing himself to be struck directly was another level of insanity. I started toward him. "Are you all right?" My spell must have been mostly neutralized by his own attack before reaching him. Nathaniel stared through the dust and began laughing. "Yes, that's it. That's what I saw." When I asked what he meant, he said he had waited 10 years to see that magic again. He declared that I had won, then tried to stand and immediately collapsed. I moved toward him. "You seem slightly insane. Let's get you treated." Instead, Nathaniel asked me to cast another spell. The novel had shown that Nathaniel's devotion to magic was unusual, but I had not realized he valued it enough to ignore injury. "Come to your senses," I said. "My spell was weakened by your attack before it reached you. If you take it without defending like that again, you could die." My disgusted tone had no effect. Nathaniel pushed himself up like a corpse and muttered that he had been right. The adults had never believed him. After 10 years, he had begun to wonder whether the magic he remembered had been a childish mistake. In the original story, Nathaniel had kept this memory secret until near the end, when he finally told Arthur Sterling, "Then the rumor that you belonged to Bloodvale Covenant was false too. It has to be. If it were true, you wouldn't leave me alive now. So, you've endured those accusations. For how many years?" These were the words of someone who had begun pursuing magic because of Elliot. Even though I was not the original Elliot, his buried emotions remained within this body, and I could feel them clearly. Nathaniel had been staring at the floor. Suddenly, he raised his head with an entirely different expression. "What do I have to do for you to show me that magic once more?" "Should I attack you again?" "Sleep." Nathaniel collapsed at last. After exchanging real magic only moments earlier, thinking of my old world made me laugh quietly. Now that I had secured Nathaniel's attention, it was time to increase my own ability. I had already calculated exactly how Nathaniel could help. While unconscious, Nathaniel dreamed of the brilliant magic he had seen. As a child, when he woke beneath the bright infirmary windows, he looked at me and decided the duel must also have been a dream. It wasn't, I told him. He asked whether every memory was real. Every one of them. Nathaniel sat upright, studied me from head to foot, and admitted that he had so many questions he did not know where to begin. He started with the most obvious conclusion. I did not drink blood, and the magic I had used the previous night was anything but ordinary. "I know," I replied. "Anyone who had seen it and failed to understand would have been a fool. Even I had been shocked when the spell first appeared. My instinctive thought had been that my brother could never become head of the family if Elliot's natural power were allowed to grow. Nathaniel demanded to know why I had refused to use magic all these years. Why did you surrender to those ridiculous rumors? Why have you lived like that when you possess this kind of talent? The night before, Nathaniel had been too overwhelmed by the existence of my magic to think beyond it. Now that time had passed and his mind had settled, he was ready to reach the heart of the problem. I leaned closer and told him that the answer could cost me my life. Before I explained anything, he had to promise never to repeat it. After a moment of suspicion, Nathaniel swore in the name of God. I was born with the strongest magical power in the Valecourt family. I began. My brother wants to inherit our father's title and become head of the house. Nathaniel's expression darkened. He already understood where the explanation was leading. I reminded him that succession normally followed magical strength. He stared at me. Are you saying you couldn't use magic because of your brother? Yes. If I use it, I die. Would he actually come and kill you? From the bag I had collected from my dormitory before dawn, I removed one crystal vial and held it before him. What do you think this is? Medicine? What was extracted to create this color? It looks like ink. I told him my brother sent it every month. It was made from substances, never officially distributed in Asteria, so even Nathaniel would not recognize it. The combination was ominous enough that Nathaniel's brow tightened. Don't tell me, when I drink it, my core becomes completely blocked. The moment I try to use magic, the backlash strikes my body. Nathaniel stared in disbelief. But your family. A mage dies if magic cannot circulate through the body. How are you supposed to survive if he blocks it? What do you think? He wants me dead as soon as possible. The fact that he feeds me this should make that obvious. How long have you been taking this? I told him that at 12, Elliot once skipped the medicine for a week. He later lost consciousness and awoke to his brother claiming that Elliot had devoured a wolf. Nathaniel clutched his head, as though the story itself caused pain. Then, with visible discomfort, he asked whether Elliot had truly eaten the wolf. Nathaniel carefully suggested that my brother might have fabricated the entire scene. Even a child capable of magic could hardly devour a wolf. Creating convincing evidence would have been easy for an adult mage. This is madness. It should be reported to an Asterian investigation team immediately. The answer seemed obvious. My appearance, behavior, and willingness to use magic had all changed. I had apparently stopped taking the medicine. Even the fact that we were holding a continuous conversation was unprecedented. Of course, I said, I want to live. Nathaniel realized that I had suppressed my spell because I feared my brother would notice the change. And I said all those things to you without knowing any of this. The memories of Elliot's first school year surfaced within him. Nathaniel remembered every cold glance, and every time he had made his contempt obvious. He had only wanted Elliot to use magic properly. Now, Nathaniel's face burned with shame. He had judged another person's life far too casually. Elliot had already suffered within his family, and Nathaniel had helped turn school into another place of pain. The entire academy disliked Elliot. So, Nathaniel alone had not created the atmosphere, yet his influence had undeniably made it worse. That did not mean Elliot had never been hurt. When I remained silent, Nathaniel lowered his head. I'm sorry. It's late, but if there is anything I can do to help, I will. In the original story, this apology would have come 10 years later, after Elliot was dead and Nathaniel was helping destroy his brother. Because I had changed the flow of events, Elliot could now hear genuine regret while still alive. I told him to stop. How could he have known when no one had told him? I interrupted and explained that I had only meant he should stop thinking about it. He had already shown a tendency to speak without knowing where his own words were going. Suppressing the urge to hit him once, I nodded. Don't blame yourself too much. The truth is that all your talk about classroom attitude was only an excuse because you wanted to see my real magic, wasn't it? Nathaniel looked confused for a moment, then admitted that was partly true. It had angered him to see me accept other students' contempt when I could use magic. He had seen my spell as a child. and believed that power could solve everything. Nathaniel stared with his mouth open, then demanded to know who had told me. I promised not to, and remarked that it was an honor to learn he had started magic because of me. I wanted to ask whether my magic had appeared independently in empty space, but let the matter pass. I had not remembered the drug's exact name from the novel, so I had searched pharmacology books whenever time allowed. Eventually, one familiar name appeared. Nathaniel read the note and nodded. The ingredients were common enough that his family could send them within a week. For the second favor, I asked Nathaniel to spar with me every day. His face brightened before he tried to claim that he was pleased, only because he had never found a suitable training partner. I told him to stop making excuses and asked for a direct answer. Of course. A chime confirmed that Nathaniel Westbrook had become my companion, and that the next stage, Constant Drops Pierce Stone, had begun. The change was immediate. My health rose to -4.8, mental strength to -9, and luck improved by a full point. More importantly, the probability of escaping the death ending jumped to 5.3%. Making one genuine companion had altered Elliot's future more than days of solitary effort. It also proved that Nathaniel would be essential to my survival. Nathaniel's status was extraordinary. Favorability 0, health 7.5, mental strength 9, magic 7, skill 8.5, impression 10, and luck 9.5. His favorability rising from -9 to 0 in an instant was remarkable, but that was not even the most striking part. His overall status exceeded that of several professors I had inspected. Nathaniel waved a hand in front of my face. "What are you doing?" I told him that our new alliance had to remain hidden. In public, he should continue treating me with distance. In private, he could help obtain the medicine and provide access to his training hall. After considering the risk, Nathaniel agreed and promised to contact his family immediately. The academy provided private training halls to high-performing students like him. There was no public register to sign, and no risk of another student entering unexpectedly. Nathaniel's movement and technique were exceptionally orthodox, which made him ideal to learn from. A skill score of 8.5 placed him on roughly the same level as many academy professors. The results were excellent. My mind control improved so quickly that it became difficult to believe Elliot had gone 10 years without properly casting. Good. You've reached the point where you probably won't accidentally threaten a civilian's life. My greatest problem had been the overwhelming strength of Elliot's magic and the difficulty of controlling it. Nathaniel mentioned that the medicine I had requested was delayed. It would arrive in about 4 more days. The temporary attention caused by my first spell had faded because I stopped using magic publicly. My brother had sent no unusual message. My skill had increased to +0.515. Although my public impression remained fixed at -10, I remained in the hall to practice a little longer, then pulled a pendant from beneath my shirt. It was a short-distance teleportation artifact, purchased with all the physical money I had possessed. Even being seen entering or leaving the training hall could become dangerous, so I linked the pendant directly between the hall and my dormitory room. I poured magic into the pendant and returned to my dormitory. But the moment the spell ended, a heavy jolt struck inside my chest. The poison had damaged Elliot's core far more deeply than I had realized. Even after a week, without another dose, teleportation still provoked a dangerous reaction. I checked the calendar and reconsidered the plan. Even after the medicinal ingredients arrived, the present-day Nathaniel was not yet the future. Genius capable of turning the poison into a core-enhancing drug. We would need experiments, careful adjustments, and an artifact to stabilize my core while the treatment was being developed. Other devices might also let me use specific spells without exposing how much knowledge I possessed. My father had abandoned Elliot emotionally, but he still provided anything that required little effort on his part. During his entire first year, excluding tuition and food, Elliot had spent less than the equivalent of 1 million won. A useful artifact began at roughly 5 million. Something genuinely desirable would require at least 10 million. Arthur Sterling had not yet begun his major activities, but around this time, the first related stories should have appeared. The headline reported that monthly magical beast incidents in the administrative districts outside Alderhaven had risen from an average of 6 to 15, an increase of 150%. In the original story, Arthur Sterling had hidden his Asterian imperial identity and personally hunted magical beasts. As incidents increased that year, the Asterian Arcane Security Bureau began placing bounties on beasts and granting extermination licenses to individual mages. I could not act openly when most citizens recognized the name Elliot Valecourt. That would be another form of suicide. The headquarters had never intended to hire proper staff. Its officials assumed villagers would volunteer to operate the offices because the attacks affected their own communities. As a reader, I had found the incompetence infuriating. When I explained that I needed to earn the money myself, Nathaniel listened with growing concern. My plan was to register as an independent magical beast cleaner, use the poorly managed local offices described in the novel, and collect the government bounties. He immediately pointed out the danger. If I moved openly outside the academy, people might recognize my face, my unusual pink eyes, or the color of my magic. Any rumor linking Elliot Valecourt to unexplained activity would eventually reach my brother. I had already considered that. Divine power could disguise the color of my spells, while a rare medicine could temporarily change the color connected to my core and eyes. Nathaniel knew the drug and disliked its side effects, but he prepared it after I explained that the alternative was far more dangerous. He also insisted on accompanying me. He claimed that he did not trust my control enough to let me hunt alone, and the sudden brightness in his expression revealed that he was also curious to see my magic in real combat. The following night, Nathaniel looked every inch a respectable young noble. I was wrapped from head to foot in black robes, a low hat, and a mask, with brilliant blue eyes replacing Elliot's unmistakable pink. "You look like a thief," Nathaniel said. I reminded him that the disguise was not meant to be fashionable. After placing a sound barrier around us, he reviewed our story. I was a private retainer from the sanctum. Vale, recently hired during his travels, and I was to speak as little as possible. The Thornmere field office stood beyond the forest, in a wooden building that looked close to collapse. When no one answered our first knock, I struck the door harder. A small window snapped open, and an irritated clerk named Bram Cooper demanded to know what we wanted. We came to clean. The main door opened immediately. The administrator pushed a worn notebook toward us and told us to write our names. When we offered identification, he admitted that the office rarely checked documents because doing so would drive away the few volunteers willing to enter the Thornmere restricted zone. His carelessness disturbed Nathaniel even more when we learned that most previous hunters had not been mages at all. The clerk defended the practice by explaining that the villages had no other protection and that no genuine mage had ever volunteered. Nathaniel revealed his wand, and the administrator's manner changed at once. He apologized, accepted our invented identities, and handed us a magic stone that would open the barrier surrounding the zone. Once we were outside again, I teased Nathaniel for nearly ruining our cover by speaking too formally. He was already exhausted, and we had not encountered a single beast. Inside the barrier, an unfamiliar part of the Stadius TD scent entered the wind. Nathaniel could smell nothing, but I followed it until we found a swarm of rotfang rats feeding on one another. Their swollen bodies were covered in pus and blood, and red eyes began appearing throughout the undergrowth as the creatures caught the scent of our magic. Nathaniel transformed his wand into a sword, and we cleared the swarm in less than half an hour. The rotfang rats were ferocious, but weak enough that a basic body barrier prevented their teeth from reaching us. "They fall over in one hit," Nathaniel observed, almost disappointed. As we filled the sacks, he admitted that killing them still felt unpleasant. Magical beasts had once been ordinary animals, but corrupted cores left them starving constantly for power. Nathaniel wished there were a cure. "If you don't make one, I will," I told him. "Then you can lend me your family's laboratory." He told me to survive first and make grand promises later. We returned the first sacks to the administrator. He was stunned by the number of rats and estimated that the bounty would already be substantial. Nathaniel looked far too impressed by the amount. So I warned him not to assume that every hour of work paid this well. Then we entered the zone again. A cleaner scent of blood soon reached me. Nathaniel groaned when I changed direction, but followed with his defenses raised. A gray-brown shape burst from the bushes and struck my barrier. It was a Silverfield hare, unconscious, but uncorrupted. After I revived it with water, it fled without looking back. Nathaniel used the moment to criticize my stance, reminding me to anchor the lower half of my body whenever a barrier received a direct impact. The lesson was useful, but the rabbit concerned me more. It had been running from something large enough to erase every survival instinct. Night Fang wolf tracks marked the wet ground, although no wolves were supposed to live inside the low-grade zone. I quietly told Nathaniel to prepare his defenses and retreat. He tightened his body barrier and adjusted his grip on the wand. 2 red lights cut through the darkness like drawn blades. Something struck my barrier with explosive force. Because I had followed Nathaniel's advice, the recoil did not throw me away. Instead, a crack appeared across the barrier. The sight revealed by that flash left both of us speechless. The creature was not an ordinary wolf. The wolf reacted to our magic and became even more violent. Plants around it thickened and stretched into vines. Nathaniel used the same spell he had once used against me. Because the creature stood on herbivore limbs rather than its natural legs, it lost balance easily. A Grimhorn chimera. Nathaniel reminded me that the barrier had felt weak, and that none of my research described the region as dangerous. He could not understand why such a creature appeared here. Arthur Sterling had visited this place in the novel, and no chimera had appeared. A difference in timing could explain different beasts, but not an artificial monster with something so suspicious behind it. I asked Nathaniel to come closer and identify the original body. The head and chest belonged to a Night Fang wolf. The horns and legs appeared to come from a craghorn goat. Therefore, the wolf was probably the base organism. Wolves lived in packs. Nathaniel asked how many normally traveled together. The moment we turned our backs, the beasts would pursue. Without thought, creatures starving for magic would never ignore 2 mages. Even if we escaped, they might descend on the nearby village and kill civilians. Could we rely on the barrier? We should finish all of them before dawn, I said. The rest of the pack attacked before Nathaniel could answer. A wolf slammed into my barrier, but this time, I anchored my legs, as he had taught me, and held my ground. More red eyes circled through the darkness, while flashes of magic briefly revealed the trees. The novel had described this zone as safe. My research had confirmed it. Yet we were now surrounded by Night Fang wolves, and one of them had been deliberately reconstructed as a chimera. The plan had failed, and for the first time since entering the forest, I was honestly afraid. Fear did not give me permission to stop. I drove one wolf into a tree, knocked another away from my body, and released a burst of white light that exposed the remaining pack. Nathaniel used the opening to finish the beasts nearest him, while I crushed the final charge beneath a falling trunk. When the forest grew quiet, Nathaniel examined a dying wolf's corrupted core. Watching it suffer made him wonder whether the poison suppressing my core could be adapted into a treatment for magical animals. The idea was still incomplete. Any cure would need to dismantle the corrupted core without reaching the heart, account for differences between species, and neutralize the remaining poison at exactly the right moment. Even so, I was watching the first outline of the medicine Nathaniel was destined to create. He admitted that he wanted to try. Then make sure you succeed, I told him. We gathered the bodies and returned to the office. The administrator's face went pale when he saw the wolves, and paler still when we showed him the chimera. Nathaniel explained that we were unharmed and ordered him to contact the Asterian Arcane Security Bureau before anyone else entered the zone. Payment had to be transferred through an old Asterian Crown Bank artifact because the local office held nowhere near enough cash. Less than 10 minutes later, Nathaniel stared at the new entry in his passbook. 950,000 pels. The amount was close to 100 million won, in the currency of my former world. Each wolf alone carried a bounty of 100,000 pels, a price that finally made sense after experiencing the danger firsthand. I offered Nathaniel half, but he refused. He had joined willingly, had promised the bounty to me, and believed the entire amount should be spent stabilizing my core. His casual admission that he did not need the money made me laugh, but I accepted. Nathaniel teleported us back to his private training hall. Before we separated, I thanked him for the night. He looked surprised, then smiled. I should be thanking you. By the following day, the hunt had become the Academy's favorite rumor. Students whispered that Nathaniel and a mysterious blue-eyed retainer had earned 950,000 pells in Thornmere Forest. Since the masked hunter had used an alias, curiosity only grew. As I walked toward another classroom, someone shouted excitedly that the blue-eyed hunter would return to the same forest the following day. My status now carried the title Hunter of Unknown. Health had risen to -3.5, mental strength to -8.2, skill to 1.015, and luck to -6.985. Though impression remained -10. The chimera had not even been reported publicly yet. If the authorities decided to reveal it, the attention would last far longer. I only had to endure an incomprehensible title. Nathaniel had to face endless questions and public curiosity. The following evening, Nathaniel entered the training hall, looking exhausted. When I asked whether he was all right, he answered with a flat, immediate no. Our hunt had appeared in 5 newspapers, and 3 interview requests had already reached him. The authorities had linked the chimera to possible Bloodveil Covenant activity, turning the mysterious blue-eyed hunter into an even larger story. If anyone connected that identity to Elliot, my position would collapse. Nathaniel had at least brought the artifacts we ordered. The parcel contained an ordinary-looking wristwatch and a plain silver necklace chain. They're remarkably ordinary, I said. That was the point. The watch concealed the magic leaking from my body after a spell, while the chain stabilized the damaged core around my heart. Neither item looked enchanted, and both had been bonded to my blood and magic. I fastened the watch and cast toward a target. The spell felt as though a rough road inside my body had suddenly been paved. Nathaniel confirmed that my output remained unchanged, but almost none of the scattered energy escaped. My status showed the practical difference. The watch temporarily raised my effective skill by 3 full points, while the chain raised my effective health by the same amount. For the first time, I experienced what a nearly healthy core felt like. Breathing became easier. Magic circulated, without grinding against. My chest and the tiny shocks that had accompanied every spell disappeared. The relief also revealed how badly Elliot had been damaged. I could no longer mistake constant pain for normality. The artifacts would protect me, while Nathaniel and I developed a permanent cure, but I still needed to strengthen my body and core as quickly as possible. After sending Nathaniel back to rest, I practiced alone until nearly 3 in the morning. The session left me exhausted. Even with the chain raising my effective health close to normal, 3 hours of practice was still my limit. I teleported to the dormitory and found a folded yellow note wedged into the doorframe. The message contained only 2 lines. I know everything, followed by an order to come outside. The writer might have suspected that I was the masked hunter, but suspicion was not proof. Responding to the note could itself be used against me, yet the old Elliot was timid enough to obey. Any vague threat, if challenged, I could claim that fear alone had brought me out. A nervous younger student named Owen Miller was waiting below. He said that several senior magic students had ordered him to guide me, though he did not know their names or their purpose. The walk continued far beyond the main academy buildings. When I commented on the distance, the guide flinched and insisted that we were almost there. He finally led me into an abandoned clearing, then fled before I reached the group waiting inside. Damian Cross, the group's leader, stepped forward. "Why did you come here? Is there something you're afraid we know?" Several of the others burst into laughter. They mocked my reply and said nothing had changed, even a note containing no explanation was enough to bring me outside. Damian's companions, Victor Hale, Grant Mercer, Colin Price, and Harold Nash, were far from top students like Nathaniel. They had enough magic to enter the academy, but nothing in their grades, conduct, or character stood out positively. They understood every relationship through hierarchy. They would do anything to please students with powerful families and excellent results. Someone universally rejected like Elliot had to be placed beneath them. Outsiders might avoid Elliot completely, but a few students inside the academy knew his timid habits well enough to despise him safely. Elliot's brief memories preserved them with particular horror. The leader approached and lowered his voice. He said nothing serious had happened. Elliot had simply begun acting strange. Another student stood, draped an arm over my shoulder, and asked why I now looked people directly in the eyes when I never had before. They knew nothing about the dangers I had feared. They had called me out only to bully me. The phrase, "I know everything," had been written solely to frighten me into leaving the room. Another student grew impatient. He said the pathetic appearance I had shown the previous year suited me perfectly. Why was I suddenly pretending to be normal? Finally, the student pointed to my uniform. "Give me your jacket." I stared, then laughed from disbelief. I looked at them with cold eyes and considered my options. The academy uniform was made through a direct order from the family. If it was damaged, Valecourt estate would inevitably be informed. The old Elliot would never explain how the damage happened. Neither would I. There was no reason to invite, at example, the family into the matter. Many people who eagerly insulted Elliot would bow automatically if they encountered a real member of the house. There was little chance of the family intervening. I only needed to consider what kind of news would reach my brother. I removed my jacket and threw it onto the ground. Watching them celebrate so sincerely over kicking another person's clothing made me wonder what kind of place I had entered. People treated Elliot like an insect because they separated him from the house. But creating an open physical incident was still different. Until now, the name Valecourt had protected him from direct violence, if only because the family might apply nominal punishment or pressure. The fact that people this thoughtless had somehow avoided hitting Elliot before today was almost impressive. Would you feel as though you'd won if I cried? Then you'll never win. Magic exploded. I considered using magic. Divine power could force their silence afterward, so the risk was manageable. The attacker believed he had finally driven me into a corner. His relaxed smile returned. He mocked the color of my eyes, asked whether I had missed the recent Bloodveil Covenant incident. Then he told me to learn from Nathaniel and the mysterious blue-eyed hunter. Publicly, Nathaniel and I had no connection. His conclusion rested entirely on imagination. He said that while I struggled to pretend I was ordinary, Nathaniel had gone into the wilderness with another mage and killed monsters for society. Another student remarked that Nathaniel and I did not belong in the same school at all. I could not even use magic. I repeated their argument back to them. While I had reached beyond my place, Nathaniel had contributed to society. You want me to return to the way I was? Fine. Perhaps I don't have Nathaniel's ability. But hearing it from people like you only makes me less willing to go back. The student stepped closer with a threatening expression. If you want to change that badly, then work hard, he said. We'll help with one thing. They had been deeply worried, he claimed. Perhaps I had stopped consuming blood again. Unlike other Bloodveil Covenant members, I could not use magic at all. 3 students suddenly grabbed my arms. My balance collapsed. They laughed at my claim. How could I know before trying? I had a method to handle the consequences, but avoiding magic remained preferable. The leader reached into the bag and removed something soft. He promised they would make me use magic by helping in the traditional Bloodveil Covenant way. If even that produced only a weak spell, then weakness must truly be my fate. It might have been a rat or a small rabbit. I could not immediately tell. Eat it. How could anyone imagine doing this to another person? You're supposed to kill it, like you did last year. The claim that absorbing someone else's magic turned a person's power red was only Bloodveil Covenant propaganda. I glared at them. His hands seized my jaw. More weight pressed onto my restrained arms. He asked whether I feared confirming that I truly could not use magic. Perhaps eating the animal alive would make a difference. Perhaps my power would suddenly improve. Red light flashed as suddenly as a lamp being switched on. I don't know which of us looks more like Bloodveil Covenant, I said. I ordered the leader to raise his head and open his mouth. warning that he would leave the clearing with at least a little more humanity than he had brought into it. I looked down into his terrified eyes and murmured, "We were born from the earth. And one day we'll return to it. Doesn't this seem fitting? Go on, eat some dirt, and see whether you can recover a little humanity." I held the soil closer. Who knows? It might even be good for your core. At the very least, it has to be better than a rat. Don't you agree? One of the students stood frozen with his wand extended. Then he shouted, You could use magic all along." "You saw wrong. You." I formed a barrier at once and reflected the spell back at him. After training with Nathaniel, an attack driven by blind emotion barely looked like an attack at all. His own magic struck him badly enough that he collapsed, clutching one eye. "Ah, do something about this bastard. We're already trying," another student shouted from somewhere behind me. From the attacker's perspective, the fight had become impossible to understand. 3 students were casting at once, yet my barrier refused to break. Every spell that slipped around its edge was cancelled by another burst of power. One of them began to panic. Everyone knew Elliot Valecourt as the donation student who could barely produce a spark. Now, I was controlling real magic. With casual precision, and the only explanation his frightened mind could find was the very Bloodveil Covenant rumor they had used against me. His hesitation gave me the opening I needed. What? Before he could understand, his balance collapsed. When he opened his eyes again, damp earth filled half his view, and the hand that had held his wand was trapped in my binding spell. I looked down at him and scoffed. "You accepted that far too easily. You should at least be able to repel something this simple." He screamed toward the others, "Do the same thing to this bastard." In a situation like this, removing the binding spell should probably come first. I had not exercised in 10 years, and I had studied magic for only 2 weeks. Yet I was holding my own. A difference in magical power could explain part of it, but not all. I knocked aside the remaining attacks and advanced. The last 2 students retreated as they shouted, "What is wrong with this? Lunatic?" The boy beneath me twisted his head and cried out, "Wait, at least be human about this. This is too much." "Be human?" I leaned closer. "You had no problem slamming me into a wall. Now, you want humane treatment?" "I didn't do it." "He did." I did not waste words answering him. I drove another spell into him, restrained him completely, and dealt with the last attacker. "Give me the wand." "No, Ag." I turned the wand in my hand and inspected it. "This is expensive." The boy demanded his wand back and threatened to report me for theft. I looked at him in disbelief and asked whether that was truly what concerned him most. Then I scooped another handful of soil from the ground. "Eat it." He stared at me as though I had lost my mind and demanded that I say something reasonable. "And feeding me a rat made sense?" I asked. "This is still more reasonable than forcing someone to eat a living animal." When I asked whether he intended to make me repeat myself, his confidence finally broke. He promised that none of them would bother me again and begged me to end the confrontation. No, I told him that if he refused, I would report everything that had happened. My magic would be treated as self-defense. The academy would panic at the possibility of my father learning the truth, and every student involved could be expelled. "Do I need to explain further?" One of the restrained students shouted from a distance. "Just close your eyes and do it. We can report that bastard afterward." At last, the boy in my grip began thinking instead of panicking. He had never considered that I might report them. Last year, Elliot had lowered his head and endured everything in silence. They had expected the same person to appear tonight. None of them had imagined he could change this completely. "You're thinking very hard," I said. "Eat it yourself before I pour it into your mouth," his friends urged. Him to obey, then immediately voiced their disgust when he did. Their hypocrisy only deepened the anger in his eyes. The moment his tongue touched the soil, I stared at him in mock disbelief. "You actually ate it because I told you to?" I ordered him to spit it out and asked whether he had swallowed any. When he protested that I had been the one who told him to eat, I reminded him that no sane person would obey such an order. "Was it good?" I asked. "Since you've tasted it, give me a detailed description." "You bastard." A groan escaped me. I closed my eyes against the spinning in my vision. At once, he seized my collar and drew his arm back for another punch. One of the other students shouted, "Stop! Don't hit him!" I opened my eyes wide and laughed. "Why did you stop? Keep going. Hit me until you feel better." The words reminded me of what Nathaniel had said on the day I first used magic properly, and that only made the laughter harder. To stop. Then, the answer occurred to him, and all color drained from his face. The student behind him screamed, "He's letting you hit him so he can pretend to be the victim later." "I won't." "Be pretending," I said, holding my ringing head. "I never promised not to report you." The boy immediately claimed that the punch had been a mistake. I agreed in the gentlest voice I could. Manage. Let hope return to his face, and then thanked him. Visible evidence is useful. His expression collapsed. I checked the clearing once more, and confirmed that no one else was nearby. Without hesitation, I drew my wand and aimed it at his forehead. Then I filled the spell with the formula I had memorized so many times that I was sick of it, and spoke the incantation aloud. Enter through the narrow gate. It was the first time I had ever cast the spell in practice, but the effect was immediate. My fully established divine power trait must have stabilized it. One of the restrained students cried, "What are you doing?" The magic interfered with the power composing the brain. It damaged perception and memory from a selected period before the moment of activation. The memories I targeted were those connected to magic. Expelling them would have been satisfying. But there was a problem. If violence against Elliot Valecourt became an official case, news would inevitably reach my family. The matter would no longer belong to me. The Valecourt household would intervene because its name was involved. Did I need to increase mental strength for this, or health? Since I already had the status window open, I decided to inspect my numbers and calculate how these students might be useful. After the confrontation, my status improved again. Health reached -3.4, mental strength -7.7, and luck -6.485. My natural skill remained 1.015, temporarily rising to 4.015 with the artifact. The improvement was small, but it confirmed that surviving the confrontation had strengthened Elliot's damaged mind. I wet my lips and examined the skill score. The midterm examinations were 1 month away. I looked down at the unconscious students and considered how useful their fear might become when a voice called from the roof above. That was impressive magic. A stranger raised both hands before I could aim my wand at him, then jumped into the clearing. He introduced himself as Nolan Fairmont, an exchange student from the Sanctum Vale, who would join the academy the following week. He recognized Elliot immediately and said that he had heard a great deal about me even abroad. His affinity was already +7. Nolan explained that the animal the students had captured was his companion, Pip, a small rabbit-like creature he had raised. He had been terrified when it disappeared and was grateful that I had protected it. Even so, he warned that we could not report the attack to the academy, because doing so would expose the fact that I had defended myself with magic. Instead, he used divine power to place several subtle enchantments over the unconscious students. The technique resembled my memory spell and left no obvious trace. At that moment, the system asked me to make another optimal choice. Nolan's status made the answer clear. His health, mental strength, magic, and skill were exceptionally high, and his traits included divine power, foresight, and insight. Keeping him close increased my chance of escaping the death, ending to 6.4%. Nolan returned his wand to his belt and asked whether I truly intended to pretend that nothing had happened. "No," I answered. "Of course not." Several hours later, the leader of the group woke in the clearing and kicked his friends awake. None of them could remember my magic. They retained only disconnected fragments, dragging Elliot outside, throwing him against a wall, producing the captured animal, and then waking on the ground. The missing memories frightened them more than a clear defeat would have. Each boy felt an instinctive urge to avoid Elliot, but none could explain why. They concluded that an ordinary student must somehow have overwhelmed all of them without magic, a possibility that wounded their pride and terrified them in equal measure. They briefly considered reporting me first, but the plan collapsed under its own risks. Their damaged uniforms, the captured animal, and their own conflicting memories could expose everything. In the end, they chose silence and hoped I would do the same. The following morning, I entered class with medical tape beside a dark bruise around my eye. Conversation died immediately. Nathaniel stared from across the room and muttered, "What happened to him?" The boys from the clearing looked as though the floor had vanished beneath them. One whispered to another that they had agreed no one had hit me. I placed my bag on the desk, walked back to their row, and rested one hand on the leader's shoulder. "You left me there," I said quietly, "but I see you managed to wake up and return on your own." Then I smiled. "Hey,